Hello, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 487 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. It is Tuesday, February 7th, 2023, and unfortunately, y'all saw last night, we have to jump on here to react and comment and discuss that game that we all eventually had to watch last night that was down in Coral Gables. Before we get into the bad episode that we have in front of you today, my name is Donald Wine. I am your host for this episode. I got my friends with me, Jason Evans and Sam Klein. First, Jason, how are you this afternoon or evening as we record here in the early part of the evening?
Yeah, I haven't had fun the past 24 hours. I mean, let's just be clear about it. I don't want to do this. That was one of the most disheartening losses in a long time. I don't know why. We could discuss which was worse, this loss or the NC State loss. For some reason, I think this one was worse. I think because I felt like the team had really turned a corner, was playing better. And to have that happen, I don't really want to do this, man. That's the truth. I don't want to do it.
We will discuss, because I will push back on said, at least the that we're down the dumps and this is the worst for a different reason. Before I do that, we have Sam Klein. Sam Klein is actually here with us live from Miami. So, Sam, how are you this evening?
I mean, other than the fact that I witnessed that last night, like for 2 hours last night, things were really bad. Otherwise, I'm totally fine. I have passed the point where I think the Final Four did this to me, but I'm totally disassociated now, sort of emotionally from this. I still enjoy it, but I don't get down about it anymore, which I think is a really healthy place to be. But man, if I was, and for our listeners who still get emotionally invested, man, last night was tough.
Speak for yourself, man. Speak for yourself. My wife will tell you that, like, Saturday night after the Carolina game, bouncing off the walls, can't go to sleep. I'm in great shape. Last night, I was like, we watched an episode. We watched The Last of Us because we hadn't watched it on.
Oh God, why would you do that right after the game?
I was like, this is perfect. Give me the zombie apocalypse right after that game. That's the only thing.
You watched the new episode?
Yes, I did. Of course.
Oh God. Oh, I don't want no spoilers, but man, what a downer of an evening.
Absolutely not. We're not going to do that. We're gonna at least try and get through this without discussing The Last of Us, which I haven't seen any episodes yet, so I actually have no idea what you're talking about.
You should watch it.
You know what?
It's very good.
You know what we do have to talk about?
We've done this before.
Is the game? It is, yes. But we do have to talk about the game this last night. It was down in Coral Gables, Florida. Again, Sam was in the building, and unfortunately, he saw a terrible game. Let's not sugarcoat it. It was 81-59 blowout by the Miami Hurricanes.
It wasn't that close. It was not that close.
Yeah, that's why I said blowout. Yeah, 81-59 was the final score. Miami over Duke. As we normally do, we start with the headlines. And Jason, I will go to you first. What is your headline?
So we got a whole slew. We got a ton of headlines from the listeners. I want to thank all of you. I appreciate the fact when we beat Carolina, the inbox, the DBR podcast at gmail.com inbox exploded, went crazy. We had like 30 plus headlines. When we got crushed by Miami, inbox explodes again. Everybody's on point. So I was reading through all of them. There's some wonderful ones in there, and I know, Donald, you're going to highlight them. I took one from John Barnhill. John Barnhill's headline, in my opinion, is better than anything I could come up with. So hats off to John. Here's his headline. Announcers run out of Larrañaga stories as Miami schools Duke. And John is dead right about that. At a certain point in that game, like, the announcers had no more fun stories, anecdotes to tell about how Jim Larrañaga is such a teacher and a professor and all that other kind of stuff. They ran out of content because there was nothing left to say.
Yeah, and he actually submitted a couple, but shout out to him. And Jason, I will note that we had 12 headlines before the game was even finished, with our first one coming 17 minutes left in the game. So people were ready for these headlines. Sam, again, you were in the building. What is your headline from this game?
Donald, I had my laptop open during this game, and I noticed the same thing, that my inbox was starting to fill up well before I was finished in the arena. So I made the same observation. I wrote my headline early in the second half, and my headline is a question: are we sure they weren't at shooters last night? I am sure. So I know we mention Shooters occasionally just to make sure that everyone has the right context. Shooters is the bar that all the Duke undergraduates and some Duke graduate students and local Durham folk like to frequent. It is not. It is. I would describe it as a place of ill repute. But that would be putting a sour taste on something that I think is a true institution of Duke and Durham. That being said, Shooters is usually the destination for basketball players, whoever is going out to celebrate on a Saturday night. I can almost guarantee that many of the team were at Shooters on Saturday. And despite the fact that, one, I saw them in person yesterday, and two, there were lots of photos on social media of them arriving in Miami, unclear to me that they ever actually left the bar.
Yeah, so I'm going to get into my headline before we get into some of the listener ones. My headline, similar vein as Sam: hungover Blue Devils leave energy and bonfire embers and get crushed in Coral Gables. Mainly because we saw I reported live from said bonfire, and there was a lot of energy at that bonfire. There's a lot of energy in Cameron, and somehow that energy did not make it down to Coral Gables. I want to first look at some of these listener headlines. There's a few that I thought were stood out above the rest. And again, we got over 20 in the span of what seemed like an hour. Again, half of them coming during the game. But I want to start with Justin Bystrack. When you send something with 17 minutes left in the game and it's actually good, I'm going to read it. So his was, from burning couches to burning film, Duke falls flat against Miami. I thought that was pretty good.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah. And again, he had it ready.
and it evokes one of the great Coach K moments from back in the 80s when they talked about forgetting the loss to Virginia in the ACC tournament, and he said, "We're never going to forget."
Here's to never forgetting this.
Yeah, here's
night.
to never forgetting. Right?
Line,
so I'm going to mess up the story. I was only -6 years old when it happened. So.
Matt Newell Ching, he submitted a few, but this one I liked because of the alliteration. Hurricanes hammer hungover Duke. Again, that hungover line. A lot of people were listening to the slight preview that we had at the end of the UNC recap, where I mentioned the hungoverness that could ensue from a UNC game. But we'll talk about that in a little bit. Chris Bynum, road woes goes as the Hurricanes blow in a Duke no-show. Lots of rhyming in that. Some alliteration.
That's impressive.
In there. That's impressive. And credit myself for actually reading it great the first time through and not stumbling over it. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, the best way to describe this game comes from Ken Swanner. And Ken Swanner, simply put, game not worthy of headline, because that game right there last night was it was something to watch. That's for sure. But it was not fun.
Ken, preach, my friend. That is so accurate. Ugh.
Yeah. So thank you to everybody who submitted headlines. Again, for all of these games moving forward, headlines, I guess you can do them during the game. We prefer them after the game so you can get a full sense of what's going on. But dbrpodcast@gmail.com, that's where you can send your headlines moving forward, and also any questions or any comments that you have about the game as well. Guys, I know there wasn't a lot of good in this game, but we're going to start with the good. And Sam, I'm going to go to you first because you had the best vantage point. First off, Sam, before you get to your good, give us a sense of what it was like inside the building at the Watsco Center. It was a whiteout. It was sold out, which is, sort of rare. They don't sell out a lot of games.
First sellout of the season for them.
Of the season, you're wondering, they don't sell out games.
Yeah.
Even when Duke comes to town, is not always a sellout. So they were jacked for this game, and it showed on the floor and in the stands. But tell us what it was like to be there.
Yeah, as you said, Donald, it was electric in the building last night. We know that Miami is not typically the scariest place in the ACC to go on the road, but they had the whole thing. The whole thing was lit up last night. Most of the fans, at least, were in white. This was not, Duke at Boston College, where the majority of people in the stands are wearing blue. The vast majority were wearing white last night. I don't think every Miami fan got the memo that it was the whiteout, but close enough that they did a pretty good job. The student section was all in white. They were loud the whole time that I was in there. Granted, pretty easy to be loud when you jump out to like a 10-point lead and you basically never give it up. So, an easy one to be excited for, but a lot of credit to Miami for showing up for this one. They did they did a tribute to a fallen soldier during one of the timeouts, and they brought out like his partner and maybe his friend, and they said like his dream was always to go to the Duke Miami basketball game. And so at least at the end of the game, I was thinking, at least in tribute to this guy, they got exactly the game that they wanted. Other than that, not much positive to report about it. I should also note that before the game, I went to the Alumni Association pregame happy hour event. Donald, I met Steven, who's a friend of yours, who's one of the guys who helps organize events for Duke alumni in the Miami, the South Florida area. So that was extremely cool. My man
Kretschmer.
Listen to the show. That's right. We had a good time. That was probably the most fun part of the evening for me, was getting to hang out with other Duke fans and Duke alumni before watching the silliness that happened in the arena. So that's the game. I if you're gonna find yourself in South Florida for a Duke Miami basketball game, go for it, and you just hope that it doesn't end up like it did last night.
Also, shout out Titanic, the bar that you guys were at, I believe. That's right. For the event. Spent a lot of time at Titanic during my days down in Coral Gables. So shout out.
It was very cool. I also got to, I had a few hours to kill on the campus, so I walked around, got to check out Alex Rodriguez Park, which is the baseball stadium there on the same, in the same complex. So pretty cool experience. I believe I said to my father, who Donald is a fellow University of Miami Law School alum, I said, I think I understand why people would want to go to school here. So that's a summary of that. Can we talk about? Can I tell you a couple?
Go ahead with the good
game. The first thing, since we love talking about them, 10-5-5 games. We had our second one of the season yesterday in Coral Gables, and it belongs to Dereck Lively. He goes for 11 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 blocks. Dereck Lively, for all that we're going to say about what's wrong with this Duke team right now and how much we really need Dereck Whitehead to come back healthy and how much everybody needs to pick up the slack. Dereck Whitehead, or Dereck Lively, rather. I'm getting ahead of myself. I just assume Whitehead is healthy again for the Virginia game. We'll talk about that. Dereck Lively, in his last 2 games, has become like a real force for Duke. And look, obviously we're going to spend a lot of time on the bad, but you have to commend him for all the progress he's made coming back from injuries. A lot of, I would say, doubters. I don't know if they're haters, but folks who have sort of written off Dereck Lively for this season and his contributions, and he's producing a lot for this team. And he had a couple nice layups yesterday. He missed his 1 3-pointer that he took, but it looked good. I give Dereck Lively a lot of credit for hanging in there and for keeping his head on and at least producing statistically on a night when basically nothing was going well for Duke.
So on this podcast, we have been believers in Dereck Lively when there have been a lot of folks who have not been believers in him. We've been saying, I can see it coming. Look, and Jon Scheyer. I mean, no one has been a bigger proponent of Dereck Lively than Jon Scheyer, who has repeatedly said in press conferences that we've watched, he's like, I can feel Derek's about to explode. Obviously, that Carolina game was an explosion, but I love that he followed it up with this. By the way, gentlemen, first of all, a couple of weeks ago, I went out on a limb and I predicted that Lively would have a 5-block game and a double-digit scoring game before the month of January was done. I was off by a few days, but I want to take a little bit of credit for that. The other thing I wanted to mention about him was he had 11 points. That was the team lead in scoring. He tied, what's his name? Ryan Young for the team lead in scoring. As a result, we're up to 8 players now, 8 different players who have led the team in scoring this season. I think I want to say me and one other person predicted 7, and one of you predicted 8. So someone got it right. I forget which one of us it was.
I'm checking. I'm the official commissioner here, so I will check while you continue to talk.
So in the stats game, we have now reached 8 different Duke players who have led the team in scoring, and I mean that's kind of an interesting, impressive thing that has happened with this Duke team. Only Jacob Grandison, among all the regulars, the 9 guys who played the most time, he's the only one who hasn't led the team in scoring this year, which is pretty interesting.
Jason, I have an update.
Yes.
Donald said that 6 players were going to lead the team in scoring. Jason said that 7 players were going to lead the team in scoring. And your boy, Sam Klein, said that 8 guys would lead Duke in scoring this season.
Nice job.
So that's a point for me.
There you go, man. Well, we're not tallying up anything yet, but yes. Good job.
Do you want to know? Do you want to know how many of us picked Dereck Whitehead to lead the team in sscoring?
All three of us.
It was all of us.
So the other stuff I wanted to say about Dereck Lively was, I thought having 5 block shots in this game, considering we were playing a team that doesn't really play through their bigs in the post very much, it shows that Lively's rim protection affects more than just, opposing big men trying to go at the basket, that he's super effective against virtually anyone who wants to come anywhere close to the lane. I thought he also showed strength on some of his rebounds. He only had 6 rebounds, but 3 of them were offensive rebounds. And, strength has been something that he's been missing a lot lately. And then, he and Ryan Young were both 5 of 6 from the field. They're the only regulars on our team who shot better than 50% from the field. So if we're going through the good, I think both those guys get a little bit of a hat tip for being efficient and effective when they got the ball in the post. It's worth noting that I thought they were consistently out-hustled and out-maneuvered by 6'7" Norchad Omier, who went for 17 and 10, who had a plus-minus of plus 32 in 27 minutes of playing time. This 6'7" dude completely dominated our big men. But I still think that Dereck Lively and Ryan Young had games that we can at least begin to put into the good section.
Lively and Young both went 5 for 6, both had 11 points. So, I mean, that's still tremendous production, and Ryan Young doing that off the bench does help a lot. And I did want to note, when you're looking at some, again, there's not a lot of good here, but Jacob Grandison and Jalen Blakes were the only 2 players that did not have a negative plus minus. Jacob Grandison was +7, led the team, and Jalen Blakes was a +1. And I believe Jacob Grandison did that without attempting a shot, or at least, without scoring a point from the field. He was 0 for 3 from the field.
Yeah, I was going to mention Grandison as well as another thing I had in the good, and I was going to talk about that plus minus. So he played 23 minutes. In the 17 minutes Jacob Grandison was not in the game, Duke was minus 29. I mean, that's kind of amazing. And look, it's just a quirk, and you shouldn't draw too many conclusions from plus minus from one game, and especially from a beatdown like this where there's going to be weird vagaries throughout the course of the game. But still, I feel like Grandison has been playing better lately. He's not scoring a lot, but I feel like he's facilitating other players. He's using his smarts, his savvy, and his experience to play well. I think he's doing a really nice job helping on defense and being in the right place on defense. I said a few days ago on our podcast that I kind of like him better than Mark Mitchell right now because he provides more floor spacing and because I think he's a little more savvy. And he didn't have a turnover. Dereck Lively, Jacob Grandison, and Jaden Shute were the only guys on our team who didn't have a turnover. Oh, we will be talking about turnovers when we get to the bad, won't we?
Oh yeah, Sam, why don't you give us another good that you had?
I want to give a lot of credit to Jon Scheyer. Not that Duke played well last night. I actually really believe that a lot of that was sort of out of his control because of the circumstances from Saturday, and there's sort of only so much that the coach can do to get everybody refocused. Like if people are distracted, and you could see basically from the tip last night that these guys were distracted. I wish they had been more focused, but in a way they are adults, and there was only so much that Scheyer was able to do. So that being said, I want to commend Jon Scheyer for the job he did. One, recognizing how out of it they were early, and to that end, he did 2 things that have seemed abnormal, not just this year, but in any year. The first thing he did is that he called a timeout very early in the game and used 2 of his timeouts in the first half. The rules in college basketball are you get 4 timeouts for the game. You have to use one by the end of the first half. Otherwise, you lose it. Almost every coach will not use more than 1 timeout in the first half because you want to preserve them for the second half. Jon Scheyer was watching that game like we all were and said, you know what? I can probably afford to use a second timeout because if I don't, things are definitely going to stay awry as they are. And even though it didn't work, I commend him for bucking the orthodoxy at least a little bit in that regard. The other thing that he did was he went to his bench significantly last night. Now, some of that is because, well, you're losing by a ton. You might as well empty the bench. What he did not do was put in a lot of guys who are definitely not getting minutes this year. Like Christian Reeves gets 2 minutes right at the end of the game. Cale Catchings doesn't get in the game. Stanley Borden doesn't. Like all these guys who don't play, Max Johns, they don't play. That's fine. Jon Scheyer did insert Jaden Schutt for a long time. He did leave Jacob Grandison in for 23 minutes. He let Jalen Blakes, who hasn't been playing very much, get 17 minutes. He said, we're going to mix it up with the guys who we think could contribute, and we're going to see what combinations work. And I want to sort of call this out because I think one of the criticisms of Mike Krzyzewski, especially in the last 10, 12, 15 years of his career, the time that we've been doing this show, I think we've periodically gotten frustrated that Mike Krzyzewski basically had like one set of principles that he followed in terms of rotations and minutes and thinking about game management, and he didn't really deviate from them, even when, he had, like, in 2019, he had guys like Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish on the team, which is totally different than having guys like, Kyle Sigler and Nolan Smith and Jon Scheyer on the team in terms of like raw ability. Manage them the same way. Jon Scheyer, totally fine mixing things up. And I hope that it takes us a long time before we figure out exactly what Jon Scheyer's coaching style is, because I would like him to remain adaptable. And I think that despite all of the craziness of last night, he kept his head on, he kept trying things. And I assume that the team is going to learn a ton from this, and they are not going to look this bad against Virginia.
Sam, I love that you brought this up. And I will be honest with you and tell you that I didn't even begin to think of talking about Jon Scheyer in a positive way from this game. A lot of people would say it's the job of the coach to make sure his players are focused. It's the job of the coach to, on a short turnaround like we had on this Saturday, Monday, to get his team ready. I mean, certainly Jim Larrañaga. Look, Miami played at Clemson on Saturday, and you cannot say that was a huge, easy, don't even think about it kind of game. It came down to the last possession kind of game. And it was a battle for the top of the ACC standings. And yet Miami turns around and they are completely focused and ready. So it'd be easy to go, what are you talking about? On the other hand, I think you're absolutely right. I think that Scheyer did a pretty nice job in this game. And I love the fact that he's experimenting with different combinations, that he's given different guys chances. I mean, the way some of our players were playing last night, they deserve to sit on that damn bench. They deserve to have to sit there and watch other people try to go to war because they weren't up to the task. Now, the challenge, I think, for Jon Scheyer is, does this result in, a real shuffle to the starting lineup, to rotations and things like that? Is that an overreaction? Do players react poorly to that? I mean, look, I could see him saying, all right, Mark Mitchell, you've been struggling for a while now. Jacob Grandison's going to move into the starting lineup. Or Dereck Whitehead, when he's healthy, is going to move into the starting lineup. Does that get Mark Mitchell down? Does that make Mark Mitchell less effective, or does it motivate him? I mean, heck, for that matter, maybe you decide to move Grandison into the starting lineup and you take Proctor out. Proctor had as bad a game as anyone on the team. Maybe you say to Tyrese Proctor, hey, let's take a seat. Jeremy Roach is going to be point guard. Jacob Grandison's two guard. I mean, there are a lot of different things that could happen as a result of this game. And I think it's just really interesting. I'm glad you called it out as something that Scheyer's doing, because it'll be really interesting to see what happens against Virginia.
I'm interested in this too, Jason, because part of Jon Scheyer's reputation, to the extent that he can have a reputation being a first-year head coach, is that he is much closer to the players than Mike Krzyzewski was. He wasn't afraid. Like, Mike Krzyzewski would pick his favorites and play them.
Exactly.
Whether that, like, come hell or high water,
good, bad, or worse. Yeah.
Coach K's top six were going to play a lot of minutes. I don't think Jon Scheyer works the same way. What's going to be interesting is the way that he manages that, if he chooses to, like you said, if he chooses to bench Mark Mitchell, if he chooses to bench Tyrese Proctor. And by bench, I don't mean just not leaving him in the starting lineup, but dramatically lowering their minutes played, because there's a lot of narrative these days about player empowerment, about the transfer portal, about how you do recruiting. Like, everything is recruiting now. And Jon Scheyer, we know, is a great recruiter. He's gotten a ton of credit in the last few years for bringing players in. Now he has to sort of deal with the consequences of who's not getting playing time and who's not playing well and who's not getting the draft pick that they want. And I think that actually this will prove to be one of his strongest suits here, is threading the needle of, yeah, I want you to come in here and succeed, and I want the best, but also I'm going to hold you to the Duke standard. And he's going to hold up what Mike Krzyzewski wanted as the standard. And if you're not living up to it, if he decides that Mark Mitchell's not living up to it, then he will find a place for him on the bench. And I think that the result will be Mark Mitchell, looking down at himself and saying, I got to be better. I really hope that happens here.
Well, and the other thing is you have to be careful not to overreact to one game. I mean, let's not forget these are the emotions of being a basketball fan, the highs and lows of the season. Literally 48 hours before this game, we were on as big a high as we have been, as Duke fans have been all year after the win over Carolina. It's not just that it was Carolina, it's that it was a very good club that Duke took care of. And
we were not that high on Mark Mitchell, but yes, continue.
Right. But I'm just saying you shouldn't. There are a lot of people out there. I saw them on Twitter and the such who are just killing this team for the loss to Miami. I'm like, well, 48 hours ago, you were in love with this team. You can't overreact to any of this stuff. So it's difficult for us, and it's probably difficult for Jon Scheyer. You don't want to. I'm talking about Tyrese Proctor as well. I mean, and Proctor was horrible in this game. But he's been great lately. I mean, like Proctor's literally coming off of like 3 weeks that he's been playing his best ball, at levels that we probably didn't think he was going to get to. So yeah, it's just really tough.
So all of what you just said, both of you, this is how I summarize it. There better be some competition and practice the rest of the week, because that's really what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Some competition, good old fashioned, ain't nobody starting, earn your spot kind of deal. All week long, because we got Virginia coming in. But before we do that, I did want to end the good with kind of I guess it's kind of a backwards good, but it does help when you're looking at the NCAA tournament prognosis and seeding. And I say prognosis, not that we're not going to make it. We're still safely in at this point. But I will say that because we got mollywopped so bad last night by Miami, we dropped 4 spots to 29th in the net rankings, which is kind of what replaced a few years ago the RPI. But Miami rose 9 spots in the rankings to 30th, which means that we actually gained a quad 1 win by losing, because that Miami win we had against them at home a couple of weeks ago is now a quad 1 win. So we are now 3-7 against the quad 1 teams, and we are still undefeated against quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4. So
by the way, we're one of the very few teams in the country that is undefeated against quads 2, 3, and 4. So I mean, but 3-7 against quad 1. Look, those are the kind of teams that you're going to be playing in the tournament.
That's like the Duke is like the 8th best team in the Big 12, right? We're fine.
Yeah, which means we should be safely in. So
we are safely in right now. Yeah.
We actually had quite a bit of good for a game where we got destroyed by 22 points. But let's take a break here. On the other side, everybody collect your breaths during this break, because we still have a lot to talk about. It's the bad, and yes, maybe even some favorite plays right after this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and we have to discuss all that went wrong at this game last night. But before we get into the meat of things, I'm going to take hosting privileges, and I'm going to basically kind of inform everybody what really happened. I said on our brief preview of this game that they needed to avoid the hangover, right? The hangover after beating UNC, and that I would know in the first 5 minutes of this game whether we had the chops and the energy to have a chance. No, we did not. It was 17-7 after 5 minutes, and it didn't get any better from there. This, Jason, is why I don't think this loss was any worse than NC State. We just did show up to play, and I'm actually kind of not really mad at it, because we knew this was going to happen. We knew that the hangover was possible. We experienced the great high that we've all described many times over the last couple of days. And the fact that we went on a Saturday, Monday turnaround down to Miami, where we are 7-6 at the Wasco Center since Miami joined the ACC. This is not at all surprising to me. So for me, we'll talk about some of the meat of stuff, the details, but everyone just let out your steam right now. Let it out. You can scream while we're discussing the bad and stuff. But after that, as we've done over the last 42 years of Coach K and the first year of Jon Scheyer, it's next play time. We can get all this meat out of here and talk about how bad we were last night. But after you listen to this podcast, get it out your mind, just like I'm pretty sure that this team is going to kind of get back to basics, because we got to go to Charlottesville on Saturday, and we had better be ready to play when we go down there. Jason.
Donald, do you remember when the schedule was released? You and I hopped on. Sam, you weren't with us, but we hopped on a podcast to do when the ACC schedule was released. I want to say it was September, I think it was. You and I both immediately said, "Oh wow, that Saturday, Monday, Carolina to Miami, that's brutal." And in fact, I believe I said, I should go back and listen to it and find the recording. I said, we're losing the Miami game. Period. And I was like, no question, we're losing that Miami game. And I hate that it came true.
Can I start the in-depth analysis here?
Yes, you may. Yes, you
I'd
may.
like to do
There's
a
lot,
dramatic,
so go wherever direction you feel.
I would like to do a dramatic reading of the number of turnovers committed by player. And very few will be spared in this one.
Wait,
Jeremy Roach.
Hold on.
Turnovers.
Can we put some like foreboding music under this?
Sure, whatever.
Like that?
whatever you got. The Imperial March. Jeremy Roach, 5 turnovers. Kyle Filipowski, 3 turnovers. Mark Mitchell, 1 turnover. Tyrese Proctor, 5 turnovers. Ryan Young, 3 turnovers. Jalen Blakes, 3 turnovers. Christian Reeves managed to turn the ball over. He only played 2 minutes. I guess I can give credit to Dereck Lively and Jacob Grandison for not turning the ball over, but all those other guys.
And Jaden Shoot.
Very good. 21 turnovers on the day. Miami only turns the ball over 12 times. And I bet we could just do the whole, like, what went wrong here around Duke turnovers, right?
Yeah, pretty much. By the way, 21 turnovers. Did you know that is tied for the most by a Duke team in the past decade? Yay.
And we tied with when we played Kansas earlier this year.
Oh, we had 21 against Kansas. Oh,
we had 21 against Kansas earlier this year.
That game wasn't nearly as bad as this one.
I'm sorry. It was 20. It was 21 against Purdue. I want to say, but Kansas.
Oh, that game was bad.
Kansas had 21 assists, which also Miami tied last night. That was the season high of assists by an opponent against Duke. This year. It was 21. Yeah,
there was
assists.
Guys, there was a sequence at the 10-minute mark of the first half. It was so bad that I wrote it all down. So Ryan Young missed a little shot in the lane, like a little bunny shot. His only miss of the night, by the way. And the ball sort of bounced around. It was one of these balls of ping-ponging all over the place. Eventually, it found Mark Mitchell. And he tossed it to Jalen Blakes for a wide-open 3. I want to be clear about how wide open Jalen Blakes was. He had time to go down to South Beach, get a drink, ogle at some women, and then come back and shoot his shot. He bricked it. Kyle Filipowski got a hand on the rebound to keep it alive. Ryan Young dove on the floor. I mean, dude was hustling and grabbed it on the deck. He tossed it to Mark Mitchell, but it was too low and it ricocheted off Mark Mitchell's leg and out of bounds to Miami. I was just like, by the way, 10 minutes into the game, we still got 30 minutes of the game to go. And what I wrote down about that play was, I was like, this is a typical play from this game.
Jason, I want to briefly give it back to you on the Saturday Monday turnaround.
That was not my favorite play in the game.
No, that was not my favorite play either. But before we get back to the kind of turnaround and just kind of what it is, I want to lead you with this, right? I've this year talked about energy, and I've talked about how it is an integral part of what we do. We know we're going to be good when the energy is there. When the energy is not there, it's pretty apparent very quickly, as it was last night, and we have a dull show of it. At the under 8 timeout in the first half, we had twice as many turnovers as we had field goals made. We had 8 turnovers, and we were 4-17 from the field. Minus a couple of guys that you mentioned, like Ryan Young, like diving on the floor for loose balls. We just didn't have any willingness to try and settle down and play our game. We had no energy. We had no intensity. And when Miami was running all over us, we didn't have any pride to say, no, they're not going to do that. We need to regroup and make it where we're not going to do that. Here's a little detail that I want to mention that should never happen, right? This goes to no matter what you're doing, you need to stay true to yourself and stay true to your teammates. With 4:40 left in the game, Miami had a rare unforced turnover. And after that was out, Jaden Shoot tried to bring everyone in for a huddle before we inbounded the ball to go down the other end of the floor. Nobody came to him. We couldn't even be bothered to do those little things. That is a little detail that means so much. It means that we just did not show up. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration from people on Monday night came around, because you can't do stuff like that. If you want to, you can have a bad shooting night. The energy could be lacking, but at the end, you still need to take care of the details. You still need to make sure that your teammates know that you're in this game and you're checked all the way in, even if you're in it for a terrible ride, like we were last night. And I think at that moment, that was where I said, oh, these guys kind of quit on each other, not in the worst sense, but in a way where they are allowing themselves to overlook all the details that make them a team, that make them what they are, that makes Duke basketball what it is. And that's why I said we need to get back to basics, because even those little things can mean so much. Like, yeah, we probably weren't going to win if Jaden Schutt got everybody in for a huddle, but we could have gone on a run. We could have settled each other down, and we could have gone down there and made a good play. Instead, we go down, we have a terrible, terrible possession as always, and then they went the other way. And I'm pretty sure that was the Nigel Pack dunks. The Nigel Pack had a couple of dunks, and he's 6 foot tall. So those are little things that, again, the pride just didn't show up, the energy just wasn't there, and the intensity was there. Now, Jason, I say all that to say this. Do you think, I know we were talking about the Saturday, Monday turnaround, and we've always had these struggles. We've had 2 this year. The first one we had was against Miami at home, and then we went to Virginia Tech and we lost by 3. This time we have a really big rival game, and sure, Miami played Clemson, but Clemson is not their rival. Clemson, they didn't play Florida State in a big-time game. Miami played Clemson and then came home, and we played UNC. We were on that high, and we just forgot to bring that high down with us to South Beach. Now, that Saturday, Monday turnaround, we talked about it at the beginning of the season. Tell me more about why these are always these trap games. And it's not necessarily just the fact that you just came off a game, but it's tell us about the fact that it's just always a team that's waiting for you to punch you in the mouth. And for some reason, Duke fails to answer that challenge most of the time.
Yeah, and I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I do not believe, I want to repeat, I do not believe that the ACC schedule makers and the folks at ESPN who work with them designing the schedule have it in for Duke. I don't think that. That said, it sure as hell looks like they have it in for Duke, because we get the short end of the stick on this Saturday, Monday turnaround way, way too often. And look, I know Duke is a big TV draw, the biggest TV draw in college basketball. And if ESPN wants to play a game on Monday and get people to watch it, putting DUKE on the screen is the number one way that they're going to succeed at doing that. That said, this shit is unfair. So this year, Duke has 3 Saturday, Monday turnarounds. You know how many Virginia has? They got 1. They play BC at home, and then they go play at Syracuse. I'm sorry, but that's nothing like playing Carolina and then at Miami. That's nothing like playing Miami and then at Virginia Tech. You know how many UNC has? They have 2. The first one is a pair of home games. Playing that second game, that Monday game on the road, makes it twice as hard. Carolina's Saturday, Monday, they have a Clemson, Miami at home, and they have a Virginia and then at Florida State. And this pattern holds by the way, NC State, who's in the running for top of the ACC this year, NC State, 0 Saturday, Monday games. Never plays on a Monday all season long. Tell me it's fair. Tell me it's fair that Duke has 3 Saturday, Monday turnarounds, including 2 against really good teams on the road, and NC State doesn't do it a single time. And by the way, I went back and looked year after year after year. The same story plays out again and again and again. It's the peril of being the number 1 team on television.
But Jason, Duke had the benefit of the refs not calling any fouls against Duke on Saturday against Carolina. So, you know, it goes both ways. Just listen to Hubert in the post-game press conference.
Total BS. All right, I got another good one for you. So anyone with a brain will tell you that the time you need a break the most, the time you need time to refocus, is after that rivalry game. No question about it. Of course. Rick Heydrich on Twitter. I don't know if you guys follow this guy. Rick Heydrich is a great Duke fan on Twitter. He went back and looked. He went all the way back to 2010, the past 13 years, to look at, the past 14 years, because he included 2010, to look at how much rest Duke had after the Carolina game. 5 times, we've had 1 day rest. 5 times, the Carolina game has been followed by it's been a Saturday, Monday affair for Duke. 8 times, it's been 2 days rest. Now, so that's playing on Saturday and then Tuesday. A lot of teams play Saturday, Wednesday. Only 1 time in the past 14 meetings has Duke had 3 days, has had 2 full days, I guess you'd say 3 days, Saturday to Wednesday after a Carolina game. Again, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't believe that the ACC scheduling office is setting Duke up, but it sure as hell looks like they are.
So I agree with all that, right? To play devil's advocate for a second, I also think that some would say, and you can call them haters, you can even call some Duke fans, would probably say, hey, maybe it's that we're being set up to play in the NCAA tournament. Because if you remember, the NCAA tournament, you're playing 48 hours or sometimes 36 hours after you play your first game. And those are against two NCAA tournament teams.
Yeah, but it's not road. It's not road games. My big
they're not
beef,
road games. That's true.
My big
That's
beef
true.
is playing a road game, and that's what ends up happening at Duke way too often.
Yeah, and the road games, especially again, that stat you had about the the less than 48-hour rest after a UNC game, that happens more often than not. Especially the one in obviously the one in the middle of the season is going to be the one where that happens. But
right. And
I think,
by the way,
also,
it doesn't happen to UNC. That's what drives me crazy. It doesn't happen to Carolina.
Right, and I think this is where I guess my disappointment for last night, and not around the horse course season, but my disappointment from last night is in the veterans on the team. Jeremy Roach is the captain, and Jalen Blake's, those guys who have been on this team, who understand that, hey, we understand what it's like to destroy Carolina and then turn right around and play 48 hours later. They understand what it's like to have that emotional high and to have to reset and get back to, hey, we have a game in front of us, and this team does not care that we played Carolina last night. And the coaching staff and the veterans on the team did not take care of business when it came to letting this young team know, hey, we have another big game. That's great. We can celebrate on Saturday, but Sunday morning we need to get up and we need to be focused and we need to be ready, because Miami is going to be focused and they're going to be ready. And you can bet your bottom dollar on it. And the fact that we had, even they had, Miami had the revenge game coming. We had just beaten them a couple weeks ago. I feel like we should have been more ready to play. Now, again, I kind of pegged this as a loss. I knew we were going to have a hangover, but this was kind of inexcusable in the sense of how bad it was and how they just did not show up ready to play. And honestly, for Sam and for everyone who was there, it should be a disappointment that that Sam traveled all that way, and some people travel all that way to watch that kind of effort. They should have been more ready to play than they were last night.
And one of the ways that you could sort of see that is the number of times, I know you guys were talking about Nigel Pack having the dunks, the number of times, and I think this also relates to the turnovers, the number of times that it feels like Miami had big plays, getting the turnover and then getting out in transition and getting a dunk, or Miami getting a forceful offensive rebound that turns into a dunk or a 3-pointer. Like it felt like almost every play was an opportunity for Miami to turn the crowd up again. And it was like, Jon Scheyer could call timeouts. I told you that he was pulling every trick in the book, but Miami just kept coming downhill at Duke with big plays. And the fact that Duke was never really able to focus to stop that is probably the most concerning thing for me coming out of this one.
Yeah, I'll tell you something about those turnovers, and you identify it, the live ball turnovers, and Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor have got to take some responsibility for this. As we mentioned, they had 10 of our 21 turnovers, and so many of them were live ball turnovers that resulted in Miami running out. The points off turnover, Miami beat us 23-9. I would have bet a large sum of money that it was a bigger than a 14-point difference on points off turnover. It sure felt like it was. It felt like Miami was getting out there and getting easy buckets, easy looks, easy shots off of our turnovers again and again and again. And look, I mean, this may sound like a joke, but I almost think someone drugged Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor's Gatorade. Those guys could barely hold on to the ball. It wasn't just the turnovers. Jeremy Roach must have fumbled and nearly lost the ball at least a half dozen times that didn't end up in turnovers. He was like just a butterfinger, and would turn possessions, by the way, into just a mess. And between that and his ball stopping, it was a disaster for our offense. Jeremy Roach, and I've been talking about him since he was a freshman. He's a ball stopper. There was a sequence in the second half, about midway through the second half, I didn't get the exact minute, where the ball was moving really crisply around from player to player. We were moving it around the perimeter. We're going in and out, looking for a good shot, a good moment. And at one of those passes, it hit Jeremy Roach, and the movement stopped. It died. He held onto the ball, likely shocked that he hadn't dropped it, but he held onto it and just stared at the defender who was in front of him for like 2 seconds. And during that time, the Miami defense that was scrambling got back into place. And then Jeremy Roach passed it to a teammate who is now in a desperate situation. The possession has, almost run out of time, and someone else is forced to take a difficult shot because Jeremy Roach stopped the ball on one of the few possessions this game where we're actually moving it around. Between fumbling it and stopping it, Jeremy Roach, and Tyrese Proctor was not immune to this either, were terrible in this game. There was no chance for Duke to win this game with our two lead guards playing this poorly.
Jason, I wish you had leveled these accusations of sabotage at Miami for the loose ball while I was still in the arena, because I would have absolutely gone and like done this research rather than talking to the coaching staff after the game, which I deemed to be unnecessary after an event like this.
So I also want to point out, I call them the hustle categories, but they're more than just that. But the points from, if you're looking at a box score, like we traditionally do after each game, you have the points from categories. And I just want to read those real quick because all of those skewed heavily in favor of Miami. Points from turnovers, Miami 23, Duke to 9. Points in the paint, Miami 42, Duke 34. Points from second chance points, Miami 24, Duke 9. Fast break points. Remember, guys, against UNC, it was 20-2 in favor of Duke. It was 17-7 in favor of Miami this time around. And again, it just felt like all of those things were, we were doing so well. And Jason, I think you talked about this earlier when you said, we had been playing so well, only for it to result in that particular effort and result last night. It just seems backwards. And I think one of the headlines said that we got from one of our listeners said 1 step forward, 6 steps backwards. And that's kind of what it felt like. We had taken so many small steps forward. Saturday, I think, was a big step forward. And then we kind of, did a backflip off the page again. And we're back towards the beginning again. So it's just, I think all of those things are why on, on social media and just everywhere you saw Duke fans just kind of like, what is going on here? Why are we subjecting ourselves to watch this game? Because these guys clearly just aren't in it, and their hearts weren't in it. So that's something that I think needs to improve going forward. No matter what, we're going to have shooting nights that are bad. We're going to have times where they put Crisco and Vaseline and olive oil all in the basketball, and it's going to feel slippery it's going to feel like everything is going our way.
Donald, they drug the Gatorade. They drugged the Gatorade, Donald. I'm telling you.
Well, I mean, sometimes we get Grant Hill secret stuff, and that's cool too. But at the end of the day, the effort's got to be there. And I think sometimes people, and this is not just this team, but teams have passed. They've had a couple of games each year where they forget that DUKE is across their chest and that everyone is going to take their best shot when they step on the floor against them. And we have to recognize that. This young team has to recognize for the last 7 games of the year that we have each team that we faced moving forward, they're going to say, yo, Duke is in front of us. We got to play. And Duke has to say, yo, this team wants to beat us badly. They want to embarrass us. And whatever they need to do to psych themselves up to make sure that doesn't happen, we need to figure out how to do that. And I hope over the next, 4 or 5 days before we head to Charlottesville on Saturday, that this team in practice relearns that part of effort and just team will, and also just intensity and energy, and remembering that Duke takes everyone's best shot, and they need to be ready for that. I know they've recognized that in the past. It felt like they lost that last night.
All right, so really quick, my last bad thing, just a couple things I wanted to note very quickly. We tried a zone defense for a little while in the first half. It was an absolute disaster. They would just pass the ball. They passed the ball to Jordan Miller at the free throw line. He got everything he wanted in front of him. He destroyed the zone defense single-handedly. That was not good. The rebounding, we got beat on the boards 38-31. As we have repeatedly said, this Duke team lives and dies by offensive rebounding and by controlling the boards. We are one of the best rebounding teams in the country. We were not against Miami. Again, they beat us by 7. And oh my God, they had 16 offensive rebounds. We had only 19 defensive rebounds. It was almost 50-50. Like, not only are they shooting really well, not only are they getting fast breaks, not only are we turning the ball over, but when they do bother to miss, they were 50-50 to get the rebound. That's just a disaster. And the last thing I wanted to note, Miami's a super experienced team, and it really showed in this game. And this maybe isn't good or bad, but it's just worth mentioning. Every starter for Miami, other than Wooga Poplar, by the way, Wooga Poplar, top 5 name in the country, Love that name. That
Wooga
dude,
Poplar, top 5 dunk in college basketball this
year. That dude laid down a severe dunk on us. It made me make a stank face, even though I wasn't rooting for it to happen. But anyway, other than Wooga Poplar, every single guy that starts from Miami, when the game is over, can go to a bar and have a drink. Other than Jeremy Roach, all the Duke guys are ordering club soda. It makes a difference.
Minus the grad transfers, of course.
Yeah, I meant among the starters. Yeah, but no, you're right. But
what is Jacob Grandison? I feel like Jacob Grandison has an elaborate drink order. Strikes me. He strikes me that way.
Manhattan.
No, but like, yes. but like he orders a Manhattan with like bourbon that's been sitting on the shelf since like 1964 or something. You know, he's got.
Look, sophisticated taste.
It's how long it's in the cask, not how long it's in the shelf that matters.
Excuse me.
Once it's bottled, it doesn't change. It doesn't change.
It doesn't. It's not like wine.
Welcome to the Bourbon Scotch podcast, hosted by Jason Evans.
That could be a bite or I guess a drink, a DBR drink. We'll do that down the road. But before
I had a Manhattan once when we were recording this show.
Yeah,
I don't think that was very long ago.
More drunk DBR podcast is a good DBR podcast.
No, some of them I feel like have gone over the line. Personally, I don't know about you guys. I've been embarrassed a couple times by my performances, but we did lose the most
the greatest ever. The Louisville one, the greatest pod ever.
Oh, yeah. What a bummer.
I can't believe we lost that.
Unbelievable. Oh my goodness. It was too good. It was too good to be recorded.
Before we get out of here, I did want to go back to the net because again, as we start looking ahead, we only have 7 games left in the regular season. We have the
Donald,
tournament.
Are you really excited for us to lose more games by huge margins to boost the net of our opponents? Yay!
No, I'm hoping that other teams can do that when they don't play us so that they can help us without hurting us. But at the same time, I do want to look forward because the net does play into seeding purposes for the NCAA tournament. Obviously, for teams that are on the bubble, it affects consideration on whether they get in or whether they are left in the first 4 or the first few out, whatever that is. But I wanted to look ahead because I think it's kind of interesting how we do it. Jason, you mentioned that we've already had 2 Saturday, Monday back-to-backs this season. We will have a third when we go to Syracuse on the 18th and then follow that by hosting Louisville at home on the 20th on President's Day. But before that, obviously this coming weekend, we have UVA away. They're a quad 1 team. And then we follow up on Tuesday with the Notre Dame game on Valentine's Day. They are a quad 4 team. We do have 2 quad 4 opponents that we will see, Notre Dame and Louisville both at home. Our 2 quad 1 teams that we will see, UVA and UNC at the end of the season, those are both away. And then we have 1, 2, 3 games that are against quad 2 teams. Syracuse away, Virginia Tech at home, NC State at home. NC State, by the way, is 41st. For that home game to go up a little bit into the quad 1, they would need to climb to 30. So they would have to do some work to get to that point. But it is possible that if NC State continues to play well when they're not playing us, they could elevate themselves into a position where beating them would actually help our quad 1 statistics. But as you mentioned, Jason, we are undefeated against every team that is not quad 1. We have only 2 quad 1 games left. Both of them are very big ones, UVA away, UNC away. But those other ones, we need to take care of business. 3 of them are at home, or 4 of them are at home. 1 of them are away. We have to take care of business against those teams if we want to move up in seeding and get ourselves into a position where we're not traveling to some faraway place to play our first round games.
Yo, guys, we've been talking about the hangover, the Saturday, Monday hangover. Apparently there's a Saturday, Tuesday hangover. I know you guys don't know this, but the halftime score from North Carolina playing at Wake Forest is 47-25. Wake Forest is beating the crap out of Carolina right now.
Let's go Deeks.
I do need to get someone to do this research, but I'm pretty sure Georgia Tech we destroyed on the road on the Saturday. The next game they got blasted. I believe who was the team we beat right after that? Wake Forest. They also lost the game. UNC is losing. There's been a lot of teams who, when they lose to us, we somehow break their spirit to the point where they get absolutely bamboozled in the next game. So if someone wants to do that research for us and see what happens to every team after we put them out of their misery, dbrpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what happens there, because it feels like recently every team that we have beaten has gone on to lose that next game. So hopefully that bodes well for us breaking people's spirits, but we want to get back to that feeling. of breaking people's spirits as opposed to having our spirit thrown into the lake down there in Coral Gables. So we will end it here on episode 487 of the DBR podcast.
Dude, favorite play. We didn't do favorite play.
Oh, yeah.
This podcast hasn't gone on long enough. We have not spent enough time talking about this crappy game.
Well, okay, Jason, you led it. So do you have a favorite play from this game?
I do, believe it or not. With 30 seconds left in the first half, Kyle Filipowski made a move in the post where he split two guys, changed direction, got a really nifty layup out of it. It was a sweet, sweet move. It cut the Miami lead to 12. It was in that moment that I was like, there's hope. We could do this. It would never be even close to 12 points for the rest of the game. Basically, Miami scored like the next 8 points in a row or something like that, from halftime into the start of the second half, and it was never competitive after that. But there was that moment when Kyle Filipowski made a really nice move in the post and scored to cut it to 12 that I thought, hey, maybe we're going to come back. We didn't.
Sam.
There was a moment in the first half, right when I got my computer working, where Miami was already winning, I think, by like 12 points. And it was like a few minutes into the game. I didn't mark the time down, but the Miami player bricked a shot and then Duke came down the other way and scored. I was too overwhelmed at this moment because I was having computer troubles to actually take note of who any of the people involved were. But that's my play of the game because I got my computer on and for 5 seconds, Duke looked like they might come back.
Sam, I think I got you covered because I'm pretty sure this is the same play. It was a brick 3-pointer from Miami. Ryan Young grabs the rebound, outlets it, and then beats everyone down the floor and receives the ball inside the post for a layup.
You are correct. So that is exactly the play I'm talking about.
That was my play. It was a very cool hustle play, one of few that we had on the night. But Ryan Young had a couple of those where he would either grab the rebound or instrumental in us getting the ball and then beat everybody down the floor and have a nice lay-in at the other end. Again, 5 of 6 on the day. Also, Dereck Lively, his only miss was a 3-point attempt. So, Jason, I know at the beginning during the stats game, you were talking about Dereck Lively threes. He's had one. He's got a little confidence in him, but so far over the last week, I believe all his misses have been outside the arc.
Hey, by the way, we have not talked about the fact that Norchad Omier came out of this game and the very first play of the game hits a 3-pointer from Miami. That's ridiculous. Like the dude shot 10 3-pointers in the season.
It was a second make all year.
Yeah. How does that, he was 2 for 2 on 3-pointers. Dude's 1 for 10 on the season. And he goes 2 for 2. It's just it's so indicative of this game. Ugh.
And Jason, that's how I knew that this game was going sideways because I've seen this guy play and I've seen him shoot 3-pointers. And let me tell you, Jason, he cannot hit water from Miami, and Miami is surrounded by water. But last night, for some reason, it got put all together from that very first play. And like you said, look, that 3 was the last time Duke was even on the game. So that was 20 seconds into the game.
There is no one still listening to this abomination of a podcast right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to.
What do you mean? Hang on.
I'm listening to you, Jason.
Don't I count?
And I was listening to Sam too.
Oh, God. Why would you put yourself through the torture of listening to us talk about a loss like this?
Because you like us. Because we're nice guys.
We're fun. Know? Yeah. Hey.
We're here to hang out with
kicked, but at least the guys are having fun.
Hey, whatever.
Okay. We're going to end on a positive. All right. Coming up this week, we are going to preview the UVA game. I think we might actually have another DBR Bites episode this week that is tangentially related to basketball, or at least related to basketball, tangentially related to what we're talking about in the course of this particular Duke Blue Devils season. But until then, that will do it for this episode of 487 of the Duke Basketball Report podcast. Jason and Sam, thank you so much. Sam, have fun down in my old stomping grounds. Glad that you, I know we didn't mention this in the pod, but glad you got to visit my neighborhood, my actual neighborhood, and eat at Sergio's, one of my favorite places.
Shout out to Sergio's.
Yeah, shout out to Sergio's and my neighborhood. That's what's up. Coral Way, representing. For Sam, for Jason, I am Donald, and this is now the Duke Band to take us home.